it comes with responsibility. This is not a gift. There's a responsibility there. Most Aboriginal people want non-Aboriginal people to be part of the country now, because the facts are no one's going away, so we're going to have to get on with each other. But the worst thing for country is to have restless spirits. And if you're not engaged with a country, you're not listening to country, you're not watching country, then you're a bloody nuisance, because you're not caring. And that's not what we want. Aboriginal people can't afford non-Aboriginal people not to care.
That was Bruce Pascoe, and you're listening to The Regenerative Journey. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and internationally, and their continuing connection to country, culture, community, land, sea and sky. And we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging.
G'day, I'm your host Charlie Arnott, an 8th generational Australian regenerative farmer. And in this podcast series, I'll be diving deep and exploring my guests' unique perspectives on the world so you can apply their experience and knowledge to cultivate your own transition to a more regenerative way of life.
Welcome to The Regenerative Journey with your host Charlie Arnott.
G'day, this episode is a ripper. It's part one of a number of interviews I did at the very recent Farm2Plate Exchange put on by Regionality, Rose Wright and her unreal team. We're at the Scenic Rim at Bow Desert for the 2 days. Went to a couple of other farms in the afternoons of those days and had some delicious dinners. But what I did do every evening at the evening events was drag to my studio, makeshift studio in part one. We're in the hay shed at Tommerup Farm, their beautiful dairy farm in the Scenic Rim. And I spoke with Bruce Pascoe, Rose Wright, Georgina Davis, Stuart Larsson, Kay Tommerup and Kate McBride. And just before we slip into the show, I just want to tell you about the latest raft of biodynamic workshops that we have released. We've got 4 dates for you. The first one is on June the 15th and 16th in the Central West New South Wales at Kapiti Valley. Our wonderful hosts there, Terry and Stuart, and they're from the paddock. Check them out on Instagram. They're fantastic in Glen Alice. And also a couple of days later on the 17th and 18th, we'll be in the Hunter Valley at the wonderful Crinklewood Biodynamic vineyard there with Oscar and his team. So we're very keen to get as many of their wine club members there as well. So maybe sign up and get yourself there. 2 other dates then in July. So those ones are in June. These next dates are in July. We're the 19th and 20th in the Western Downs in Queensland. Adele and Philip Hughes been fantastic supporters of regenerative agriculture there through for some time now, and also through the Lachlan Hughes Foundation, which we'll be talking about in due course. I met them at Albury, and they're just fantastic, lovely couple. And also then on the 22nd and 23rd at the Sunshine Coast with our good buddies Mitch and Nina Bray at Bray Farms there. They'll be wrapping up our sort of winter series for 2 days, the 22nd and 23rd. All those tickets are available on our website. So go to the bio, go to the website, do whatever you can to get onto our try booking site. Early bird tickets are not going to be around for very long, so jump on board. And I hope you enjoy this collection of wonderful presenters from the Farm2Plate Exchange Conference as much as I did. G'day, Rose Wright.
Charlie Arnott.
Here we are. Welcome to Tommerup Farm. Mm-hmm. For those who are on the YouTube machine, they can see us sitting in a hay shed.
Yeah.
Basically, there's bars of hay behind us.
Doesn't it smell good?
It's fantastic. It's the first time I've done an interview in a hay shed before.
I love firsts. That's great.
So don't light up, okay? No. It'll be the last interview I do at a hay shed. And my last one with you.
Yes.
Let's make sure that's not the case.
We don't want that.
Rose, we are here at Tommerup Farm because it's the late afternoon session of the Farm2Plate Exchange conference just outside of, well, we were in Bow Desert, weren't
Yeah, we were.
in the scenic rim. And I'm here to talk to you about your role in putting together the Farm2Plate Exchange, and also, well, how are you? It's sort of nearly end of the first day.
Yeah.
How's your pulse?
Oh, how could I not have incredible energy from the people in the room? I mean, it's the vibe.
It's the vibe.
It's the vibe.
It is.
The energy in that room is, and this is the second time you've been, it's more intense than last time, partly because there's more people, but I think we've got, I can't explain it. It's just this incredible energy, giving energy, and I'm completely energized from it. I mean, we haven't had much sleep. The team and I have been working around the clock, pulling it together, and so we're really tired, but we're incredibly energized at the same time. So Friday's looking like sit in a fetal position on the couch
Stay in
with
bed,
a cup of tea, with a cup of tea, and not move, or a bottle of gin, depending on how I'm feeling.
Well, you and the team deserve it, because it's gone off without a hitch. Well, from the attendees' point of view, I'm sure there's stuff going on in the background, always is at these sort of things. Right. If I leap across to your mic with a sock, it's just because the wind's picking up.
Sure.
But it's clean.
As long as you don't stuff it in here. Okay.
They're clean. So if we hear the whoosh of the wind,
yep.
I think we've done pretty well to get sort of out of it here. This is actually a fantastic spot. Rose, tell me about the genesis of Farm2Plate Exchange. What was because the first one was 19.
Yes.
And it was close to the coast. It was near the Goldie, wasn't it? South of the Gold Coast?
It's in the Tweed.
In the Tweed, that's right.
Yep.
It was too. So why have you done this? Because I'm sort of preempting this with someone else came to me and said, why isn't Rose doing this everywhere? Where else is there a conference like this? So maybe there's two questions in there, but the first one is, what was the genesis of Farm2Plate Exchange?
Okay, that's a really lovely question. I guess the last 15 years I've had the privilege of working with regional communities and farmers in particular, helping them to identify ways that they can create greater value from their farm practices or their farm products, or their farm just generally, helping them to look at ways to develop beyond the farm gate and create meaningful connections with consumers and create layers of value, move away from being a price taker or price maker, all those, all those buzzwords that everybody uses. But because I've had the privilege of spending time on farm with so many people and really connecting with them and being inspired by them, and by regions doing incredible things. Most of the regions I work in are not established food regions. They're emerging. I mean, when I started working in Scenic Rim, the mayor was the biggest carrot grower in the district, and he went, who'd want to come and visit a farm in Scenic Rim? Actually, that probably wasn't his accent. Anyway. But now they...
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about, just from that accent. You pretty much dobbed me. I'm going to whip that sock over there. Sock. They are clean. They look pretty manky.
That's okay. I'm not going to look at it. It's a very unusual looking thing to have.
It looks like a green ice cream or something, doesn't it?
That's not what came to my mind. But anyway. So I guess I tend to work in regions that are embryonic in their collaborative process, or farmers that are at the beginning. We sometimes work with people that are established. Like if I think about Ros and Damien at Rich Glen Oliver State, we've done some work with them. They've been part of our program. So sometimes we get people who are already established who are trying to get the next level or trying to refine what they're doing. But quite often we'll find that we're working with farmers that are starting at the beginning and really trying to work out what can I do and how do I go about it. And they always start with, well, what do I have to do? And that's the last thing I think about. So I guess the reason why Farm2Plate came to fruition was because I have over the years accumulated so many amazing stories. And every time I go to a conference, now there's some amazing conferences around agriculture and food and tourism around the country, but none of them connect the value chain. None of them think about that connecting, production to consumption value chain. And they're all pitched at kind of talking at you. And it's a bit like eating Chinese food. You kind of eat and you think, oh, yeah, that was satisfying when you listen to some of those things, or you go to one of those conferences and half an hour later you go, you know what, I'm still hungry for more information. So I And most of those conferences don't tend to be, they don't tend to be pitched at the average person working on a farm trying to find solutions. And I thought, well, if I'm meeting all these amazing people who have all these common values, maybe there's an appetite out there to bring them together so they can share their information with each other and to learn from incredible people like yourself and like so many others, like Charlie and Bruce and, you know, all the speakers that we've had today and tomorrow. Maybe there's an opportunity for them to be inspired by that, but then for the speakers to hang around and actually be part of the experience as well. So I came up with this crackpot idea that it was a 2-day intensive learning experience, an immersive learning experience where everything that you did, said, ate, drank was reflecting the values that we put around, the farm to plate value chain and positioning farmers to be able to do things differently and tap into the conscious consumer. And so that's where it came from. And the first one we did in 2019 was in the Tweed because I live in the Tweed and we'd been doing a lot of work in the Tweed. And the other thing that we try and do is select a region that we've worked in previous times or currently. So we're currently working again in the Scenic Rim a decade later. And here comes Dave Tommerup. And
Comes Dave with the light.
He's got some lighting happening.
G'day, Dave.
Dave's amazing.
Oh, you're the man.
He is. Look, he's put the lighting up.
He's been working all day, and I bet he's been wearing that gear all day. And look how clean he is because he just
put
does
my
it.
husband to work, Dave.
I met Tony earlier.
He's a good bloke.
He's a good fella.
Yeah. He's here. I can't tell stories about him.
That'll be fine, Dave, for the moment. Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Now we've got Mike the Brewer coming.
Mike the Brewer.
Don't you love it? You can bring a beer, Mike.
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. He's a brewer.
He's a brewer. He's got Scenic Rim Brewing.
Why did he think he'd even think of turning up here without a beer?
He probably didn't realise we were here.
What do you reckon he came over here to drain the spuds or something?
No.
He went, hang on, there's people in here.
I think he just came over because he was following Dave and he was his helper. They're good friends.
Oh, that's what happens here where we are. It's all about helping each other.
It is. And I think, so that's what this was all about. The whole idea was I had the privilege of seeing all these amazing people. I wanted to get them all in a room to see if it would actually help them to grow and that they would be willing to share and that, that there was a way to take people on this. It's a bit of a narrative. Like we've really curated the program.
Over 15 years now? How many years since?
I've only done this twice.
No, but not so much. I'm thinking more the program. Your I guess Farm to Plate program. How long have you been doing that?
Yeah, I've initially started it in 2006.
Yeah. Okay. So what that is?
Yeah, that's about 17 years.
So this is a culmination of all that work, all that experience, and then you're putting it on for 2 days.
So, and this is really about bringing that community of interest together and being able to have some challenging conversations like we did today around, there's people in the room that don't want to know about regenerative or from a policy setting, make it really hard for regenerative or for even doing composting on farm. There's policy settings set out by the Environmental Agency in Queensland make it hard to do, composting on farm.
Are they here today?
No, they're not, but we're going to have a conversation. But I think, so being able to highlight these issues and go, hey, look, these are great. This is the way the world's moving. We need policy and regulation.
Progress.
And we can do that together. We can demonstrate there's a need. And by bringing people in a room together or even down to the point of saying, can we collectively buy packaging together and share knowledge around that and save all those farmers, there were 20-odd farmers who put their hand up that said, yeah, I'd be interested in doing that. So, if we can help save them some time, they're not competing with each other. They're all collaborating. But if they can all invest and buy collectively, it'll save them some money. It'll save them some time. I don't have all the answers, but there's so many answers sitting around that room. And if you can bring people together, everyone is raising the tide, yeah? All the boats floating, what's that saying?
I don't know.
But you know what I mean.
I'll have to put it in the show notes.
FYI,
Rose was
Rose was
referring
rabbiting
to
on about boats which have nothing to do with agriculture, but it is fishing.
Aquaculture. So tell me, we're in the scenic rim. You've been helping farmers in this area for some time now. Where else have you planted seeds? What other sort of regions, and how far do you go? Because someone asked me today, said, where else does Rose do her work? So where else can people find your work, your handiwork?
Okay, so we've done the Mary Valley and the Sunshine Coast area before it got all organised. We were doing some work out there. We've done work in far north Queensland, tropical North Queensland, Atherton Tablelands, down around Mission Beach. We set up food groups up there. They're all still happening, and ran workshops up there. We were almost hunted out of town by the local tourism people who said, we're not about food up here, we're about reef and rainforest. And I went, well, actually, mate, every visitor eats and drinks, and you've got plenty of it growing.
Put your hand up if you eat food.
Yeah, pretty much. And then so Mackay, Isaac Whitsunday region, we helped them do a strategy up there, did business development programs, and help them set up a farmers market. So we've done work there. New England, we've done some work in. We're doing work at the moment in Glen Innes. We've previously done some work around Armidale, Toowoomba region. We did a little bit of work up there, a little bit in the Southern Highlands, a little bit on the Murray. I've done a lot of work in the Murray region, both sides of the border. Currently doing some work in Western Murray in a place called Barham and Walcool, which has been really badly affected by, the Murray-Darling Basin and drought. And that's incredibly challenging. I've worked in other parts of Victoria. I've done some little bit of stuff in South Australia and
everywhere. I've
been everywhere, man. Like, there's a lot of other places too. Northern New South Wales. How can I forget my own patch? But Northern Rivers.
Yeah.
My aim back in 2006 was to get myself a couple of cheesemakers and I got that. Got a little cluster of modern cheesemakers happening.
We changed some great cheesemakers up here, isn't there?
Well, you know what was really interesting about the cheesemaking? The reason why we had some of the best dairy in country in the world, but Norco's policy at the time was that they wanted 100% of the dairy farm's milk. So I sat with the CEO and the chairman at the time and I said, look, why don't you let some of these farmers put 10% into their own production, not milk, but cheese. All it's going to do is grow the reputation of the region as Australia's premier food dairy product region. Yeah. And that brand, you're the biggest player. Anyway, they agreed, and that's how people like Nimbin Valley Dairy and Bangalore Cheese.
Was that you, Rose?
I did that.
That's awesome.
They did our program, believe it or not.
Wow. Because I'm good mates with Chris Eckert, who spoke today.
Chris is a great guy.
Isn't he fantastic?
Oh, my God, he's beautiful.
Don't tell him that, though.
No,
we won't.
He doesn't listen.
We won't pump his tyres up too much.
He's gorgeous. I had to give him a hug.
He's quite big, though, isn't he? He's big, to get your arms around him.
Not exactly spell just because you're skinny, mate.
Oh, stop it.
He's just fit.
But the and he told me I didn't really know the ins and outs of it all, but he said, they let us have a percentage that we can do our own thing if we wish, which I think, I don't know if the other dairy people do that, do they?
There's a few that do it. So
awesome.
There's quite a few in the Northern Rivers that do it. And even Kay and Dave were able to tap into that policy as well. Yeah, cool. So they were able to do some valuating. That's where Kay started doing her butter, and she's won delicious awards from that. And so that policy gives farmers the opportunity to dabble and test and trial and see if there's a market for and if they're good at it. Some people can make cheese and other people can't. Kay's not interested in making cheese. She doesn't float a boat, but she loves making handmade butter. She hand churns butter.
Yeah, wow.
And and it's sensational.
Yeah.
That's why she's won the delicious awards. But so she makes a whole that she plays to her strengths and the strength of the herd, and the merwa, which is like terroir for milk.
Merwa.
That's a Roseism. Sorry, it's pretty tacky, isn't it?
Milk. The taste of milk. No, it's so true. It is so true.
It tastes different.
It's absolutely. And I was talking to a couple of years ago a fellow in LA he's a cheese. What's a cheese man?
Cheesemaker.
Cheese. Well, no, he was the guy who was the.
Oh.
He did the cheese in the restaurant. They had a specific guy at Fig Restaurant there in Santa Monica. Anyway, a lovely guy, Eric. He is a legend. Anyway, and he was talking about exactly, and I never thought of it before, is the flavour of the cheese is a reflection of the land, which is like wine, like
beef,
like anything.
like lamb,
awesome.
It's everywhere. So every single product that you eat and consume, you can taste the soil or not, the microbes or not. You can taste the minerals. You can taste the climate, the environment in the food that you eat if you've got that closeness to the producer. And that's why some meat that you eat that is, is
horrible.
Yeah. Do you know the stuff that feedlots, that's what I'm trying to say. Like it's got a sourness to
CAFOs.
it. It's got a sourness to it, It just, and it doesn't, you taste meat that's grass-fed or organic, that's real meat, that's traditionally farmed, not conventionally farmed, but farmed in a way that allows the environment to flourish. And that meat tastes different.
It's a real depth of flavour.
There is a depth of flavour, and it's not all melt in your mouth. It's got texture. You can actually feel, you've got a great mouthfeel. The texture in your mouth is amazing. I'm not a food critic, just a food lover.
No, and that's the important thing. And it's, it's a bit like wine. It's like, what's good wine? Well, whatever tastes good, whatever floats your boat. There you go. The boat's back again.
Oh, you come back there.
I'm just trying to
help
you. I'm just trying to help you out.
Any storm.
There you go.
You're so far from the coast.
There'll be another one. Rose, for those who, just while we're on that, farmers thinking about, and there's a few in the room I've sort of been chatting with today and know of, that are sort of going, oh, how do we value add? How do we get it to direct to customers? What are some of the things you would say they need to think about, step 1 or 2? What are some of the things they need to do, apart from call you and have a chat with you?
Yeah, no. Well, yes, we'd love to have a chat with them. But first thing is, why are you doing it? And don't tell me it's just because you want to make money. Because no farmer I know does it just because they want to make money, because there would be other ways to do that. Understanding the thing that gets you out of bed in the morning is the thing, that the driving passion that motivates you is the most important step, and you use that as a cornerstone. The other thing I would suggest that they do, the next step, or you could do it the other way around, is to really think about the core values that underpin your decision making, and then that gives you a framework for everything that you do. So the values, that's your brand framework. It's your business framework in terms of decision making. It helps you to identify who to collaborate with and who not to collaborate with. How you're going to go about it and what you need to do is a process then of aligning to those things. So how you would go about it is really understanding the capacity, the capability of your farm, where your spare capacity is, where the opportunities are. I would suggest, start small, test and trial. Don't go building a big factory, Start really small. Things like farmers markets or food events, or, don't just go to family and friends and say, does this taste good? Really get out there and get to know who your consumer is, and then adjust what you're producing and how you're producing it to meet the customer needs, and in a way that aligns with your core values and your core purpose. Because we talk about living the brand, and you would know about this, but you talk about living the brand. It's a hell of a lot easier to live the brand if it is authentically representative of your values and what drives you. If it doesn't drive you, then why are you doing it? And, one of the things I've learnt to do over the years is sack customers. So I haven't had to do too many, but I've had a couple of people.
How do you do that? You're fired.
No, you just go, well, look, you know what? I'm not feeling, I don't think that our values align.
Yeah, cool.
And Kay talked about that on stage today. She talked about the hotel that she worked with on the Gold Coast, where it was a waste of her time and energy. And she's done things on farm with organisations where they've wanted a certain outcome, and she's compromised her values, and the outcome is not good for her. They've got what they've wanted, but there's no business outcome. They might have thought they were going to make money out of it, but they weren't on brand. They weren't on message. It wasn't aligned with them. So it's really important to be able to be confident in understanding why you're doing what you're doing, why you're going down this venture. And for some people, it's because you're passionate about the farm. The thing about farming that's different to any other business is it's not like a retail shop. You might be passionate about selling widgets in a shop, but you can walk into the shop in the morning and you do what you're doing, and you walk out of the shop in the afternoon, and yes, you might take the bookwork home, but the bookwork's not going to wake you up in the middle of the night because it's giving birth. You can't leave a farm. It is part of your farms and farmers. People are intrinsically linked to their land and to their story. Farms are people's past, present, and future. It's not just their business, it's their home, it's their way of life. It's everything about them. And I guess developing a business model based on a farm is very different to developing a business model for a tech startup or developing a business model for a restaurant in the city or whatever. It's just different. And you would know this because you're an amazing farmer and you know what I'm talking about. But unless you're a farmer, you don't other people don't seem to understand the difference. And so what we've done over the years, I guess, is tried to refine a process that actually really works for the primary. I mean, I'm the daughter of a farming family, Italian farming family.
So your parents came out from
a place called Grassano.
Where's that?
In Provincia Matera in southern Italy, between Brindisi and Bari on the south coast, right in the middle of the Shin. On
the Shin.
Yeah, just so inland from Naples, halfway between Naples and Bari. So down there, 1,100-year-old village on the top of a mountain.
So Mum and Dad came from there over here.
Dad was a POW in the war. He came over, was put onto a banana farm as they did because they needed workers. All the men were gone. He was then sponsored back out, and Mum had never left the village. She'd never got on anything that was motorised. She'd only ever walked to their farm and ridden a donkey. So poor woman was dragged to Australia. She thought she was going to Austria, and then all of a sudden she's on a boat.
Oh no!
Austria. And anyway, so they started from nothing, and they were banana farmers in the Tweed. And my dad they were incredibly fierce, proud people. But I remember the food system just screwing them over. Like they would produce beautiful products and they would send them to market and they would get a bill for the transport. And when I started working in this area, I started to discover that system hasn't changed. There's still no transparency in the food system, and I've only ever wanted to change it. So I tried to do it from one angle, and then I ended up in this space. And I guess for me, this has been about trying to get one farm at a time, one region at a time, empowering them to create their own value chain, leave the price taker food system behind and create your own way. And if you create your own way and you do that with other people who share the same values, you can all work together to make that happen. Yes, it takes time, but at least you get the joy and the satisfaction of being your own master and not being stuck at the arse end of a supply chain, being screwed over by the big boys. That's probably not appropriate for the podcast, and I'm so sorry. You'll have to bleep that.
We don't do we don't cut a thing. If you sneeze or cough or anything.
You told me that at the beginning.
No, it's all good. I'm reminded from what you just said then, Rose, JFK, I'm pretty sure it was him, he said farmers, they buy retail, they sell wholesale, and they pay transport both ways.
That's right.
And it's a bit rude.
It is.
And the other thing, back to nature, I say that nature is your most valuable business partner, and if we don't treat them like a business partner, then, we'll get screwed over. Well, it's just, we need to consider that very seriously, all the variables and all the relationships that need to be built around our relationship with nature, with that cow that's producing the milk that's going to make the butter.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you heard today from Stuart Wilmot, Stuart Larsson, Chris, they're all talking about how they're getting that return on investment by putting in place ecological systems that, it might have a little bit of a longer payback, but it might take a little bit longer to establish. But then once it's established, not only does it pay back environmentally, it pays back financially and it pays back socially. I can't begin to tell you how many farms I walk onto, and the soil is sour and so are the farmers. There is do you know what I mean? There is, I walk onto sometimes I walk onto and I'm not, I grew up on a farm. I'm not a farmer. I couldn't tell you how to farm.
It's in your bones. It's in your bones.
It's in my bones. But I think the thing that really I've observed through being on farms, conventional and otherwise, is that there is a physical difference in the properties, which we've seen through all the things, the form of farming, biological systems, regenerative farms, etc., organic farms. They they are more resilient. They all go through drought. They all go through all those things, but they bounce back and they're more resilient. And yes, they take a lot more work, but the payback is there. But what is different to me that I've observed is that the people are happier. They feel good about what they're doing. And when you can connect those people to their customer, they get another layer of reward from the appreciation that the customers can give them. And that is the motivation
it's
they
a beautiful
need.
cycle.
It is a beautiful cycle, and that, that builds. And it's when you create that cycle that then you see the younger generation wanting to come on board as well, because they can see, rather than mum and dad slogging it getting a bill for transport. All of a sudden they've got, we met these great customers and they were really appreciative, and that joy that they get from people actually recognising and appreciating the effort that goes into producing whatever product it is so important. We all need that like I've just fed off the energy today. Farmers need to feed off the energy of their customers.
and it's a beautiful cycle, because the love that farmers put into the land gives back tenfold, and you can feel it as you say walking onto farms. That is then reflected in the taste, the quality of the food. The customers get a buzz about not just the story, but and the quality, the taste that gets fed back to the farmers. The farmers then are thankful for that, and they're thankful to the land. It's this beautiful leap that happens.
Yeah.
Rose, I'm conscious of time. You, because you're the boss, you have extra time. But I've got a question for you. Any, without sort of being accused of favouritism, any gold nuggets that you want to just draw upon that you heard today from any of the speakers? Anything that stood out as like, bang, that was cool? Yeah,
look, I think the first session this morning between Charlie and Bruce, Bruce is coming from and because I've had the privilege of sitting with the elders last night with Bruce, which was just incredibly profound. It was cool. It was just amazing, humbling. I think what I saw was that these people are saying the same thing. It's about caring for the planet. It's about looking after Mother Earth. Bruce uses the language of love, and Charlie talks about, caring for the planet and the soil and the ecology. They might be more technical, but they're saying the same thing. We are all trying, and I think we've got so much to learn from Aboriginal land management. And what I've seen here in the Scenic Rim through those conversations is there is nothing to fear. We just have to talk, and we need to be respectful of each other. So I think we are all coming from it from the same perspective. And I think that the link that we've got between caring for country and caring for our farms and our farming future is the same.
Same thing.
We're coming from the same area. So why can we not? We need to overcome that. We need to build that. And I think that was the thing that it was like an epiphany for me, that it's, my God, farmers and Aboriginal people are actually trying to look after the same land. We just need to love each other and work together and learn off each other like we are doing in the room.
At the end of the day, everyone's trying to grow food.
Yeah.
And do their best at it. And just some people have different benchmarks, and some people, are less considerate of the resources and what they actually give back. That's right. One of my favourite quotes from Bruce this morning was, "Good farming is no harder than bad farming."
Yeah, 100%. Love that. It's so true. Actually,
it was a ripper.
It is a ripper. I had lots of quotes, but I didn't bring them with me because they're in my paperwork, and you didn't tell me I needed to bring a quote. But
no, this is all about quote.
I know.
1 to Charlie, 0 to Rose.
I have.
We're not scoring.
Thanks for that. Well, I think this is the other thing that I'm hearing, and that is that creating layers of value rather than volume is the way to go.
Oh yeah, that was cool.
And that's the piece that I think we're all trying to do, is create value. Your customers will appreciate it, and you'll get that back in spades. So create value. It's not just about churn and burn.
I love that. That's unreal. Rose, you've just hit the 30-minute mark.
I think we're done.
I think we are. I've got some other the presenters and the cool and groovy people here today, this afternoon to interview, and then more tomorrow. So I'm very pumped. I'm so excited to be in the hay shed. Dave's got the light rigged up over there. I might bring it over here so we can actually see what we're doing.
I might get you a beer.
When the sun sets. I'll sneak over now. I don't think I'm on. Who's next? I think I should know that now. Oh, it's here. Georgina. Dr. Georgina Davis.
Oh, she's
at 5:10.
She is.
So I won't rock the boat and ask her to come over early unless she can, but I think
she's a bit of a super intelligent woman.
Well, she's got an unfair advantage because she's talking tomorrow. I haven't actually heard her talk yet, so I'm going to have to just wing it. She can practice her thing.
She's really, as a leader of an agricultural organisation, she's incredibly innovative and responsive. She's a very dynamic woman and very deep thinker.
Thank you for the heads up. Anything else I need to know?
She's just a bloody wonderful human.
She's ace.
She's great. I like her a lot.
Okay.
We didn't even talk about agri-tourism. We'll have to do that another day.
Oh, we will. I might even try and track you down for a podcast, the proper one.
Oh, could we do?
You're in credit now.
Oh my God, I've got to go. See you later.
Thanks, Rose. Bye. Bruce Pascoe, welcome to this episode, whatever, I'm not sure what number it's going to be, Bruce, of the Regenerative Journey. And welcome to the dressing room here at the function centre in Bow Desert. Welcome, Bruce.
Oh, thank you.
Bruce, we had the pleasure, the attendees at the Farm2Plate Exchange put on by Regionality, the pleasure of listening to your presentation without a PowerPoint, which was refreshing. We loved to. Is that because you don't need one, do you?
It's because the old one was out of date. So much has happened that what I talk about now, I don't have a PowerPoint for and haven't had time to do one. And, I keep threatening to do it, but I just don't get around to it. Like we've had 2 floods in 6 weeks and, that they're not, I love a good flood, but compared to a fire, but there's always a bit of cleanup, so you get a bit busy.
There's other stuff to do. And can I say, I don't think you really need one. Don't rush out.
Yeah.
I wouldn't worry. Honestly, it was so compelling. And I have heard you speak a number of times. Last time was at Brunswick Heads, just north of Byron Bay there. That was fantastic.
Yeah.
Bruce, you said a lot of wonderful things in your address. You also said, which is clearly a theme, and it's a wonderful, refreshing theme, and that is that you want all Australians to engage with the landscape, engage with Australia, and you want us to interact with it, which is a really refreshing point of view. Can you sort of expand on that theme? What do you mean by engage with it and why?
Well, I think most Aboriginal people want Australians to feel at home. That does mean understanding the history as well, but also to understand the country and to treat her well. So it comes with responsibility. This is not a gift. There's a responsibility there. Most Aboriginal people want non-Aboriginal people to be part of the country now, because the facts are no one's going away, so we're going to have to get on with each other. But the worst thing for country is to have restless spirits. And if you're not engaged with a country, you're not listening to country, you're not watching country, then you're a bloody nuisance, because you're not caring. And that's not what we want. Aboriginal people can't afford non-Aboriginal people not to care.
How do people? I mean, there's a portion of my listeners, Bruce, who are not farmers and not on country necessarily. They're living in cities and so on. How can any sort of tips that you can give them for how they can actually participate and interact with country? What can they support, or where can they go? What can they do?
Just be kind to country. Not poison the soil, not use up all the water. By using Australian plants, your water use goes down. This country is very dry, driest continent on Earth, and we're consuming water at a greater rate than we ever have. The country can't continue like that. So all of those little things, being good consumers, that is consuming less, is very important. But engaging with the Aboriginal history of this country as well, not resenting it, not trying to deny that it exists, is important, and developing a relationship with Aboriginal people. And, people always say, I don't know many Aboriginal people, or I've never met an Aboriginal person, don't know how to meet Aboriginal people. And my answer to that is teapot. Ask people in for a cup of tea, because there's, most black fellas will accept a cup of tea, and then you can have a yarn. Then the relationship is real. It's not, it's not an artificial relationship, and this is a conversation Australians haven't had together. So we need to start.
It's a bit of a sense, sensitive might be the right word, but I know as a white farmer, I've been to a number of events in the last couple of months, where there's been some amazing Indigenous ceremony and acknowledgement and welcome, and as a farmer, a steward of the landscape, I felt really underqualified. It's really interesting for me, and it was really the first time earlier this year that was I just felt underqualified. So how can farmers like me support farmers like you? What are some of the practical things we can be doing, to support not just you, but the Indigenous peoples of Australia, as opposed to, say, someone who can just buy, looking to buy products that are Australian.
Well, we need to talk to our government and local councils about the realities of Australian history. And Aboriginal people would like to be growing the old foods. We just don't own any land. There are small pockets of land owned by Aboriginal people, of course, and many of those communities are growing food from the old plants. But the vast majority of us just don't have land. So having an adult conversation with government about a bit of social justice is very important, because there are wastelands around that have been destroyed by industrial farming and reliance on European plants and animals that can be repaired by good use. Those lands are virtually valueless at the moment. Plenty of them could be returned to Aboriginal people without anyone losing a wink of sleep. And that's the sort of thing that non-Aboriginal people can insist on.
And that can be pretty, well, I shouldn't say easily done, but the first point of contact would be local councils, I'd imagine. They'd probably have lands that they've just literally don't know what to do with.
And a lot of our plants will repair that land. So without spending much money at all, that shire or that local government district is going to have better land. Land that's looked after, land that they don't have to spray for weeds, land that's actually producing something. It's rateable land.
And that can't be a bad thing. Gives, but then it becomes an asset for that community, doesn't it?
Yeah. And Aboriginal people return to the country. And the social benefits of Aboriginal people living on land, raising their families on the profits of land, has enormous social benefits.
You said a fascinating thing this morning, Bruce. One of the things you said was, it was fantastic. Good farming is no harder than bad farming. I think that's a ripper.
Yeah, well,
tell me about that.
A lot of people have told me that by starting to plant perennial grains, they actually work less. They're making more money, but they work less. They have, one bloke said, my wife and I got to know each other because we went on a holiday. We thought we hated each other.
Had the kids moved out by that stage as well? That helped?
Well, I'm not sure, but I just thought, you stop work, you have a look around, and you realise your best mate is the one you've been sleeping with. And, it's not a real farming story, is it? It's about relationships. But, if farmers are often so pressed for time and so exhausted that the home life just disappears. I've seen it. I've lived in the country all my life. I've seen that happen. But it was just a lovely thing to hear these stories, and I've heard more than a dozen of them, of people realising that they don't have to flog themselves, they don't have to flog the land to make money and to grow things. And they can have more time, One bloke had to learn to play cricket again,
Because he didn't have time. What are we going to do?
Yeah.
Get that old...
Because he always thought he never had time.
Yeah.
No, take Saturdays off.
Get that old, what is it, those Greg Chappell, were those scoops? Remember those ones with the scoops in the back of them?
Yeah.
Someone Nicholas or something?
Yeah.
It was that long ago since I picked up a bat.
Well, the Triple S, the Stuart Surridge, that was a pretty good one.
Dig him out of the garage. But I love that because, and my wife and I were only talking about this the other day, not necessarily using these words, but in sort of that context of, like, you might be married to your wife, your partner, your other half, but you're allowed to have an affair with the landscape. There's romance. The romance doesn't just have to be in your marriage. The romance can also be in the landscape. Yeah,
you fall in love with the country. You might be an Australian bloke, and you might be dedicated to your half a dozen beers at night. You can stop and look at a blue ring. It's not homosexual to look at a blue wren, and that's not to, I'm not slinging off at homosexuality. What I'm saying is that so many Australian straight men are so uptight about loving anything that they lose touch with their families, but they also lose touch with the land, Have a look around. Charlie Massey's book, The Cry of the Reed Warbler, is a really good indication of that. You can be a 6'2" farmer, and you can stop and watch ducks on a dam, and it's not a waste of time.
And it's therapeutic. It's so many. It's our office, really, isn't it? That's where we're working. So why wouldn't we make that enjoyable? A cultural experience, an appreciation, and as I suggest to people, stopping and observing and interacting is an act of compassion.
Yeah, and they're our coal mine canaries. Their health is an indication of what we're doing.
Farmers' health? Or the birds' health?
The country.
Country's health, yeah.
Country's health.
Yeah.
If those birds are happy, we may not have done something right, but we haven't done something wrong. And every profession ought to be working on that credo that doctors live by. Do no harm. And I want scientists, I want engineers, I want politicians to adopt that credo. Just think about what you're doing. Do your very best not to do any harm. And if you haven't done any good, well, at least we haven't gone backwards.
Yeah. And just have been conscious of that. Talk about being conscious, Bruce. You mentioned that in terms of the cultivation, the production of food, indigenous food, that 1% of the was it the profit, the revenue? There's a 1% sort of take home for indigenous people.
Yeah.
Of that 100%.
Yeah. It's not good enough to eat rosella chutney and feel virtuous. We've got to make sure that rosella chutney has intellectual property. It belongs to Aboriginal people, but only 1% of it is going back to Aboriginal people. So we've got to ask ourselves the question, why is that? And once again, you turn back to your politicians and say, that doesn't seem right. As an Australian, country of the fair go, that doesn't seem like a fair go, because there are some of those big companies that are selling bush tucker under lovely kind of green labels. They're ripping Aboriginal people off. This is why I went back farming, so that we can prove that we can do it, but we're also in the industry. We have to prove that our culture hasn't been washed away, but we also have to participate and be allowed to participate. And we're lucky to have the farm down on the Wallagrow, but that's an accident of us getting that. You know, no one helped us get that. We're just lucky we've got that ground. But this is what Australians can do. They can participate on behalf of Aboriginal people and intervene. Let's have an intervention.
And then we like a good intervention, a good pattern change. Yeah. How can for a consumer, someone who's they're looking at buying the Rosella or they're buying a packet of, I don't know, the grocery store and there are finger limes there or something. How can they ensure or understand, potentially which brands are the ones they should be following, or what when you say they're getting the indigenous, people are getting ripped off, what does that look like? What's the bit that they're getting ripped off about? Is it just because they've just gone, here's some seeds, I'm gonna plant them, grow them, sell them? Indigenous, traditional owners don't want to have anything to do with you. What does that look like?
I think the consumer chooses, and it's common for consumers to prefer an Australian cheese to a European cheese. It's an intellectual decision and an environmental decision because, why are we floating cheese from one side of the world to the other when we're capable of doing it? So you can choose Aboriginal products, and that will be an intervention on our behalf. And that's why we've called our farm Black Duck Foods, because when we start producing those products, we want people to be choosing us. A lot of people are going to make a lot of money out of those perennial grains, the tubers, the salad vegetables, all of those things. We're not going to stand in the way of anyone doing it, but we're growing them too. We'll tell you the story of them too, and we'll have our language name will be on them. Choose us, If we run out, go and buy from Coles.
So it's about point of difference and the integrity, isn't it?
Well, and I think the story is interesting in its own right, and Australians, as lovers of their country, ought to know those stories, and we don't at the moment. And it's a really good story. It's a very compelling story. It's a very environmental story and socially just. So I can't see any downside.
Bruce, I've just looked at the time, 16 and a half minutes. I've overstayed the welcome by a minute and a half. That went quickly, didn't it? Can you tell us about any... Oh, can I do two quick questions?
Yeah.
You said, and it was, again, another gem, you're here talking about love, not tractors. Can you we sort of touched on it, but is there anything else you want to add to that statement, which was lovely because you were, that word was in there.
We really have to respect our country. Look, I love tractors. I've got two of them, a red one and a blue one. They're both old. They both still go. I've got a Ewan lad on the farm who actually loves machines and he keeps them running for me. So I don't need a new tractor. But what I do say to the lads is be careful where you take it. Choose your old track. Don't put tracks all over the farm. And every time be conscious of when you're running over grain. Try and not do it. Try and avoid it if you can. Be kind to the country. So that's what I mean about love, not tractors. The tractors are an incredible thing. We couldn't have operated without that red tractor. It's just been, slasher on the back, bucket on the front. It's just the ideal combination. But we've got to be conscious that that's not all that farming is. Farming is trying to hold water onto your property. And we did that simply by growing long grass and letting it die. And now we're harvesting. But we went from no soil to some soil, and now that amount of soil is increasing. And after the fires, I thought everything had gone in terms of wildlife. But I was cleaning up some limbs and trunks after the fire, pushing them together. And I realised I had dunarts. I'd never seen them before. and they're creatures, they're grain eaters. I'd never seen one in 70 odd years on the planet, and I realised I had them on the property, and they are there because of our grain.
Is it a marsupial? Is it an insect?
A little miniature kangaroo.
Yeah, dingham.
And very it's got a bit of character, It's got an opinion about itself, this little thing, because we're sun drying our grain before we thresh it. This is the stage we're at, where everything is manual, and so we've been dragging the grain out on tarps into the sun every day to dry it off, and the Dunarts arrived, and they reckon they own the grain. So this little tiny creature, which is not much bigger than a house mouse, it'll run at you, saying, no, that's my grain. No, don't
you think about it?
I sleep there.
Yeah, right.
And so by allowing the grain to grow, we've brought back this little thing. And it was a thrill for me just to see the animal, but it also shows you what's happening to country. We call our company Black Duck Foods, and we've got more black ducks than we've ever seen.
And to think that little Dunart was somewhere surviving in a pocket in a corner somehow, and then you've come along and opened a window, and they've just gone, you beauty.
Yeah,
they probably breed like
they've
rabbits.
Proliferated because of the grain, is it?
Yeah.
And just listening to Charlie Massey before about length of pasture and how you keep the root mass of your pasture intact, and that's all we did. We just allowed the grass to grow. We didn't flog its guts out. Farmers think that if all their grass is half an inch high, that they've done a real good job. But, we now know the benefits of strip grazing and things like that. We did it by getting rid of all the animals entirely, just so we could concentrate on our grains. But we probably introduce a few stock later on because we've got grass to burn.
Yeah. Bruce, one last question. Projects, is that, what I know that a couple of months ago it was creation of a charity or a trust that up there at Brunswick, or that was one of the. How can people support you? You're probably not sort of someone who goes and bangs a drum too much, but how can people listening to this support Black Duck Foods, or sort of apart from buying your products?
Yeah, well, we've got a website, Black Duck Foods, and we've got a board, and we're trying to raise money to employ more people. Because we're on the threshold of really good sales, but we're not quite there yet. And there's a bit of engineering to be done. We know the kind of harvester we want. We just haven't built it yet. And so we've got a local Aboriginal man who works with sheet metal, a bit of an engineer. We're going to employ him to build us this harvester. And it's going to be. It's going to be a fantastic thing. And our aim in doing this is that he gets an industry out of it as well. That he stops, repairing motorbikes and starts selling harvesters around the country, because as more and more Australians get into it, a design for purpose harvester will sell pretty well.
And people adapting to this new type of farming, new opportunities. It's a wonderful thing. We're on Mununjali country up here, Bruce. Have you been here up at this part of the world?
I have. I've never been to Bow Desert, but I've been up around the country, and those lovely women this morning told me that Munun means the black dirt. You go further out west near Brewarrina, and it's the division between red and black dirt, but Munun means black soil. So for an agricultural conference, you're on good ground when the people call themselves black dirt.
And it's stunning landscape. I drove from the east, quite hilly and windy, and then sort of you come out here and it's just amazing. I haven't got time to go further west, but beautiful part of the world. Bruce, we've so overstayed the welcome, 8.5 minutes over. What's Rose going to say? You're abusing my guests.
Oh, poor Rose.
Bruce, I have very much enjoyed our chat. I'll be catching up with you in a couple of weeks' time in Sydney at Fairlight Butcher Ryan Watson's little event there on the 1st of June. I'm not sure when this is going to come out, but the tickets sold out within 24 hours, Bruce, so you're probably a popular bloke. Whether you like it or not, people like you. And your books, I want to get you to sign a couple of the books. They're in front of me there. But fascinating chat, Bruce. Thank you so much for spending your time and sharing your wisdom. I know you're heading south again today, so I trust you have a safe trip home and you get time to sit there on the porch with your dog and have a cup of tea.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to. Poor old thing.
And write something.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I've got to do that.
As you said, you are a writer.
That's the trade, yeah.
You got it. It's your fault for being a talker too.
My grandmother's fault.
Is that? She was a writer?
No, she was. Poor thing couldn't read, but she made sure I could.
Yeah, nice one. Well, what a lovely legacy you're rolling out, and the legacy of your books. Bruce, thank you. We'll wrap it up, and I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks' time.
Good on you, mate. Look forward to it.
Are you looking for more information to assist you on your regenerative journey? We've created an online community of supporters with exclusive access to interview transcripts, live online Q&A sessions with Charlie and his interviewees, as well as the opportunity to be interviewed on the show yourself. If you would like to be part of this community or would simply like to contribute to the development of the podcast series, please make your way to patreon.com/The Regenerative Journey podcast. We look forward to you becoming a member of the Regenerative Journey community. Let's get back to this week's episode.
Oh, Georgina, we're on. Is that applause for you?
Not yet.
Not yet, it will be. Dr. Georgina Davis, welcome to the Regenerative Journey.
Thank you.
We are sitting in a hay shed on Tommerup Farm, and in the background, for those listening, you'll hear we're actually at the evening function. It's sort of pre-dinner chit-chat, and we quite close to it, so we can hear that in the background. So please excuse the, I think it's Rose there talking now, who I just interviewed before. Georgina, thank you for your time. You clearly had no warning about this at all, and you're totally on the spot.
Not a dicky bird, but thank you very much for having me.
Now, if I move your microphone, don't be scared. I'm just adjusting it so it's about that far from your beak there. Georgina, you're on tomorrow as part of a panel session. What is, just to give us sort of a bit of an idea of what that panel session is talking about, to then put it into context of your background, your experience. What is the panel session you're on tomorrow?
So it's setting the background of what's happening here in Queensland. So I'll be covering some of the challenges that the industry is seeing at the moment, but then moving very quickly on to what the opportunities are. 70% of Queensland is still drought declared. So we do have our challenges, but we're nearly a $20 billion industry. And in my view, and I may be biased, Queensland's agricultural sector is the most vibrant. We have the widest range of commodities in terms of we are the only state where you can get mangoes to truffles. We've got beautiful produce, beautiful climates, and really, the future is very positive for Queensland's agricultural sector, despite the challenges that are posed by our climate.
What I neglected to tell listeners is that you're actually the CEO of the Queensland Farmers Federation.
Apparently so.
How long have you been in that role?
So I started in November 2019, just before a global pandemic and everything else. But as I said, the agricultural sector, it's been business as usual for us.
What about things like fruit picking and getting harvest done with no backpackers being not around, apart from Aussie ones, but they might have been getting paid to stay at home anyway. What was that? Was that one of the biggest challenges for the industry? Not just Queensland, but everywhere. But your experience?
It was, and Queensland's actually been very negatively impacted by the lack of, I suppose, travel between the borders. So at the moment, we're about 12,000 workers short in Queensland, so about 9,000 for our horticultural industries. And then we're seeing now shortages for the crush coming up, cotton, the intensive animal industries. So the fact that our borders are closed is a significant issue, not just what I would term, as you said, backpacker labour, but also those visa workers that we would get from the Pacific. And it is challenging to try and motivate young people to come into our sector and to actually find that domestic flow of staff.
Are you the first female CEO of Queensland Farmers Federation?
I'm absolutely not, actually.
Right. Oh.
I've followed in the amazing footsteps of a number of women before me.
Fantastic.
So we had a lady called Ruth, who was previously CEO of the Rice Association. So she actually employed me. And then before Ruth, we actually had a lady called, I'm trying to think now, oh my Lord, I can't think of her name. But she is now the CEO of Food Bank, and she's doing amazing stuff.
Yeah.
And there is still actually a really close collaboration between Queensland farmers and the food that they donate to Food Bank because of her relationship and her leadership. So Food Bank are doing some amazing things.
Just while we're on women in ag, what from your current position and maybe even before that, what's your sort of sense of progress there? And when I say progress, are you seeing more women in agriculture? My perspective is, they're a bit handier than blokes generally. What's
that's our ability to multitask.
Absolutely. I'm amazed I can actually have the video going at the same time and the audio as well. That is a significant accomplishment for a male, I got to say. So tell me about that, because I have my view, but I'm more interested in yours and what you're seeing. Is it positive? Is it what's happening in the space?
Right, the future for agriculture is very positive. We are seeing that we are attracting a new generation, a young generation, a generation that for the most part actually is very highly skilled and very highly educated. Now, we know a lot of the women who work in agriculture actually have a range of tertiary education. And because of how some of the farms within farming families pass, where they pass to the male heirs, what that means is that the women who marry into agriculture don't always have an agricultural background, but they do bring a unique skill set from the industries that they've previously worked with. And they also have, as I said, that really high level of education. The one risk we do have, and QFF actually released a report on this about 6 to 7 weeks ago, was that a lot of women actually have financial instability who work in the agricultural sector, because we see it in the census, where the women who work on farm, because their family members aren't actually classed as workers, so they're almost an invisible workforce. But because they're not classed as workers, they're not being paid wages. They're not being paid a super. So when they get to old age, that does leave them very financially insecure. So there are definitely some challenges there.
I'm a big fan. I think that the future of agriculture, not just Australia but globally, is in the hands of, not to put too fine a point on it or dump all that responsibility on women, but I think that the real progress has been and will be made by women. I think they've just got a bit more of a sharper, keener mind about things, and can sort of. I was talking to David Westbrook, who that interview with him and on the show Regenerative Journey was released today. He talked about two ladders: the ego ladder and the I forget now, the purpose ladder. And we both agree that men probably spend a bit too much of their time on the ego ladder, climbing that ladder. That's their intention. And women sort of I don't know how much time they spend on the ego ladder, but I think they're a bit more comfortable on the purpose ladder, which is a wonderful thing.
It is, and what our research has really shown us is that the women sort of keep the farms going when things get difficult. So they are the main contributor of off-farm income back to the farm when, for example, we're in the middle of drought or things are difficult on the farm. They bring that income back to the farm, keep the farm going. And we also see in terms of the levels of diversification. So we're talking a lot here at this session about agritourism, agri-processing. In many cases, the examples that I see are always being led by women. And this is a perfect example where we're actually tonight at the Tommerup's farm with Kay. And Kay is really trailblazing in terms of this farm now has agri-processing and agri-tourism. And that's something that Kay has brought into the farm, those skills and those expertise, where she married into the dairy farm. And what's great about that also is that in a lot of these agricultural sort of diversification processes is it means actually setting up a different business. So you have the farming entity that very often is in a trust or another type of entity, business entity, and then the farming, agri-processing new entities or agri-tourism entities are a separate business. And that's really good for the women who set them up, because at that point, all of a sudden they're on the payroll, they're recognised as workers, and very often they're paying themselves superannuation, they're paying themselves work cover payments and insurance. And that's fabulous for everybody.
Well, they've got some skin in the game, haven't they?
They really have.
And it's a wonderful point that marrying into a farming family, and again, Kay just mentioned it before, didn't she, about marrying Dave, on the farm here, and it's that injection of not just skills, it might be marketing, or it might be, I don't know, any other lot of skills that farmers don't have, not sort of that aren't necessarily farm related, but bring them on as a positive thing. Also not having the baggage of being a farmer, not sort of going, oh no, this is the way we do it. But they're really good at asking questions.
A different perspective, not accepting about that's how we've always done it. And I think that injection of new perspective is really important.
Really healthy. Talking about healthy, I just note on my notes here, Georgina, in August 2020, the Queensland Farmers Federation released its agri-tourism roadmap. Tell me about that. Given we're at a sort of agri-tourism conference, I guess there's some parallels there?
There is, and what we really noticed was that agri-tourism in Queensland is quite nascent compared to other states. But then when we look at other states and really break down the type of agri-tourism experiences they have, it's very much been led by cellar door, and then the cellar doors become gin distilleries as well. And it's sort of then creates a cluster for other types of tourism and agri-tourism to build on. We haven't really had that in Queensland. And when we actually had a look at it, we've got more diversification and more diverse products and crops than any other region or state in Australia. So we really want to what we started saying is, well, what are the barriers? How do we get rid of the barriers? But then what are the opportunities? And that roadmap, really, when we looked at it, we think that the agri-tourism industry is worth about $5 billion to the Queensland economy by 2030. So it's something we've not adequately explored, but it's got great potential. We've been working with Regionality, who've obviously organised this conference, in the development of that roadmap, in the development of other documents to try and remove those barriers. Local government planning is a big issue. But then how do we also recognise the opportunities? And we actually did some work as well with Airbnb. Only 2 weeks ago, we ran some webinars for farmers, just 2 webinars. We had over 80 farmers participate in those webinars, asking some very interesting questions. And since then, a lot of those farmers have actually signed up. And the great news is, particularly with our borders closed, more people are looking for domestic tourism experiences. More people actually do have questions about where their food comes from. They do want to get out onto farm and ask those questions. They do want their children to know where the carrots come from and those sorts of things. And we're actually seeing now that if you try and book a farm stay for Queensland on Airbnb, they are booked for some time. So please get in there quickly for Christmas.
You get in there now because there won't be anything left next week.
There really won't be.
But it's a real sleeper, isn't it? That, you know, farms, and often I guess farmers are on their farms. It's their workplace. They don't necessarily, understandably, see its beauty or they have a particular perspective, which is generally work related, and there's an appreciation, I'm sure. But isn't it interesting that they are in some of the most beautiful parts of Queensland, Australia, and they're sitting on these vistas, these aesthetically pleasing, you know, valleys and places just like here. And it's a whole other enterprise and opportunity, isn't it? Obviously, there's a bit of infrastructure maybe and some regulations to get around council and so on, but it's the massive opportunity, which I think is a whole other thing. Just a quick little story. Rose told me before she was working with a mob in Queensland somewhere, and, you know, sort of talking to local council saying, look, she was working with a group, and then I think the local tourism mob said, you might know this one, said, we, you know, trying to hunt her out of town, basically saying, yeah, we don't do agro-tourism up here, we do reef and, you know, it's reef and rainforest. That's their tourism thing. It's like, hello, don't every single one of them eat food? Absolutely. When they're up here? So why wouldn't that be interesting? But anyway, I trust that was a successful little program she ran up there. Georgina, there's been a theme certainly today and this morning, all day really, while we're at the Bow Desert there, about regenerative agriculture, indigenous cultural practices. Does Queensland Farmers Federation have if not a policy, but a sort of a view or where they sit with that sort of style of farming, which simply put might be working more closely with nature?
Absolutely supportive. So it's not just about Regenag and the opportunities they bring. We've seen new green market mechanisms, so more opportunities for carbon trading, although that is incredibly complex. I have problems understanding it, and farmers, you know, it's not their day job. But there's more we can be doing with carbon. We're also now seeing the federal government develop biodiversity credits. And the Queensland government in October last year released the first reef credits. So there's a lot of green market mechanism opportunity for farmers. It's about, though, the farmers being able to easily access, which means the systems need to be transparent. They need to understand how they can participate. And then they can even get to the stage, I think, where they can stack some of these credits. And that again brings more on-farm income. It keeps them in agriculture. It improves the environment that we live in, which ultimately improves the productivity and the profitability of the farming that we're undertaking. So lots of opportunities. And QFF, we were very supportive. About 4 years ago, the Queensland government made amendments to the Water Act to include things like elements such as valuing cultural water and cultural flows. Those are now embedded in our water legislation, and so is climate change. And we were very supportive of those measures. And then at the moment, we're looking also at land certification models, which could incorporate regen ag. They could incorporate existing credit models. Really, you know, although it's a new market, it's emerging, it's going to be the future of where agriculture goes to, particularly if we're looking beyond our borders. So one of the discussions we had today at the forum was about some of the countries like the European Union actually bringing about legislation that looks at the emission intensity of their imported goods to make sure that they align with their domestic production, which is fair enough.
Yeah, sure.
It's not protectionism. That's just ensuring a level playing field with the producers and the farmers that they have in those countries. And quite frankly, we could do with some more of it here in Australia, where our farmers are held to very high environmental standards. They're held to very high animal husbandry and animal health standards. And then we import goods that, are well below that standard. So I'd like to see a level playing field here in Australia as well for our farmers.
It's a bit of, I reckon it's a disgrace, really. I was talking to a stone fruit farmer or ex-stone fruit farmer at Byron Bay the other day, Nashi, if you're listening. He had been doing it for decades, and the Howard government put in the whatever it was, trade agreements, free trade, maybe it was. I can't remember now, back in the 90s. And it just, there was no more seasonality. There was no more the top end, and he had sort of early maturing fruit, and it just was just this crappy produce that is grown in Australia, and it's some of the best in the world. Why? They thought that was a good idea to get some brownie points with whoever it was, what other countries. I think it's a horrible, it's a disgrace. One last question. You're a doctor, Dr. Georgina. What did you do? Is it PhD, doctor? Are you medical doctor? What's a doctor?
No, and I only use the doctor if I'm complaining. I'm just Georgina most of the other time. But I'm actually a doctor of engineering. So my background's, the doctorate was actually environmental technology, looking at advanced biopolymers and organic management. So,
Screws.
Yeah. Well, that's the next opportunity as well for agriculture here, particularly in Queensland, particularly for things like our sugar industries, about how do we value our biomass going forward. So lots of opportunity.
Well, you are in the hot seat there, or the right seat, I should say. Georgina, thank you for your time, and you performed magnificently, given you had no warning at all. You've set a new standard.
I do hope so. Thank you.
Thanks, Georgina.
For your time.
We'll speak soon. Bye. G'day, Stuart Larsson.
Thanks, Charlie. Hey.
How are you?
Good. Very good.
Great to see you here today, and thank you for your time. How much warning did you have about this?
A couple of days, which is no problem. Yeah.
Now, the good thing is I just interviewed Georgina, and she hasn't actually spoken yet, so we found some questions to ask, and we ran over time, which is awesome. I'm in a similar situation. Even though you spoke today, I wasn't there. I was interviewing Bruce Pascoe.
Oh, righto.
So we're just going. This is all very fresh.
Yep. No, good.
So Stuart, can you give me a bit of a rundown on the session? I'm just going to you just start, because of what I should have done was found they're pretty rowdy, that mob over there.
They are a bit.
Who's on there at the moment?
Not sure.
You were just enjoying your beers too much. Now, Stuart, you were on. Your session was the case for renewal, farm renewal case studies, farmers doing it differently.
Sure.
Well, let's start there.
Well,
what are you doing differently, Stuart?
I guess our story goes back 30 years, and we were conventional farmers, and as good as anybody.
What were you growing?
Mainly, we went from the dairy industry into the beef industry and then into soy. And we basically, you might not believe it, but back in those days, before the cotton industry started, we had very few controlled chemicals, you might say, in what I call the classic or the conventional industry. And we used to use a 5-year rotation on basically soy and Rhodes grass, and we then had to try and make a dollar out of, when we didn't have the chemicals to the broadleaves and whatever. We then developed markets for our Rhodes grasses into the Middle East, into Saudi and UAE. Went into basically hay over there, and then they'd plough it out and then go into winter crop, winter wheat.
So just on that one, so the Rhodes grass was something you sowed?
We sowed it.
Yeah, you sowed it, and then that was, so you cut it for hay.
Well, no, we harvested the seed.
Oh, the seed.
Yep.
Oh, and what would that, then you'd sell them the seed?
We sold the seed, and that went. It was you might say the petrodollar, and it was a good market, and we had it for a number of years. These days it's more relaxed because they realise that their aquifers are better kept rather than emptied to produce hay.
Took them a while to work that out, didn't it?
Well, no, it was a competition between the sheikhs over there that they used to see who could. If you flew over Saudi, it was covered in pivots.
Yeah.
It looked like it had the mumps and the measles. And so then what happened, we in our quest to produce huge amounts of seed, and supposedly, as I learned in agriculture in education days, the more you put on, the more you should return. That wasn't the case. We, in fact, chased higher yields in our seed crops, and basically the telling tale of it was that we'd killed our soils with the use of chemicals and high rates of nitrogen, and we were on a hiding to nothing. Our costs were going through the roof. Our returns were going the other way. So we recognised that, and basically our soils were dead. And what happened behind the headers, where the windrows would be behind the headers, and in the spring we'd have all these weeds come up, and basically we built up this huge organic matter level on top of the soil. There was a home for thistles and everything else, and when it rained you could smell the soil. It was off. Simple as that. It was biologically dead. So we then decided to look around the world and see what else people were farming and how they were dealing with it. And
when was this, just to set the sort of time frame?
This was in the 70s, 73, 74. And basically, mid 70s anyway. And basically what we then had to do was how we're going to repair these soils. And so we jumped in a plane and went and finished up with the Amish in the Middle East and in Middle America. And they had beautiful soils, but they also had beautiful composting techniques. And compost, and even today, it's still the secret to our farming. And making good compost, not just regenerated, you might say, organic matter, but properly made.
Yeah, not the stuff that the council puts through a thing and dumps on the side of the road, at their depot with the old wooden couches that are chewed up as well and all the...
Charlie, you hit it right on the head. Probably one of the biggest problems we've got in the compost industry is that, because you put a heap of organic matter into a row or a static or whatever pile or whatever, and turn it 2 or 3 times and call it compost and sell it to the open market, that has done a lot of harm. Not being properly managed and properly made. And a well-made compost is equivalent to 10 tonne of raw manure. And that's pretty much, if you work that in the cost of raw manures, that's a significant amount of money.
So just to clarify that, so you're talking about, say, a tonne of compost is equivalent to 10
tonne of raw manure. Yeah, putting out on the field.
And as well as the sort of the that ratio, the fact putting raw manure, whether it's chicken, pig, cow, onto the paddock, it's not bioavailable. It's disappearing in the atmosphere.
Exactly.
It's a bit of a waste of time, really. I mean,
a major part of it goes up there or down there, and it's not so much that it's all the other things that are added into those industries. You need to go through a composting process, and we use what we call NOP or NOP. That's an American standard where you've got to prove that compost has gone to 70 degrees for 4 to 5 days. So that kills any pathogens or weeds or anything in there. And that doesn't happen in a lot of composting processes. So we're monitored on that through our standards.
What does that do? We could talk for hours about this. It fascinates me, Stuart. That 70 degrees, is that also, it might be killing pathogens, but what's it doing to the good microbes? Is it
basically you're zonking them, and you then, what happens in your process, you then rebuild those, you might say trophic levels, as we call them, where you start with your bacteria or the ciliates, and then your bacteria, then your fungi, then your protozoa, your nematodes, and on you go from there. But yeah, it's probably you might say you're nuking the product for starters, and that's important because there are a lot of weed seeds and there are a lot of things that are, like you might say, probiotics and biotics and whatever are in there.
God knows, I guess in some, maybe not yours, but I know a lot of cases, the ingredients, God knows where it's come from. You don't really know the source. You know,
well, you don't know.
And no.
True. Yep.
More. Keep going. This is cool.
Yeah. No, so, the making of compost is, we've got these days, the more intense you get, and I always say that people basically see with their nose, in the sense that if there's anything wrong, they'll report it because of the smell. Now, technically, you shouldn't have high odours except for that first 1 or 2 days, and then you'll get some, say, raw manure odour. But generally, you shouldn't have, from there, you shouldn't be able to smell a compost setup. If you do, you've got something wrong. But these days, we've gone a little bit more professional, and we're relying on, whoever it is that's doing the work. We use the thing called Compost Manager. And that's been designed in London or in England anyway. And basically what it is, that whoever's testing each day, or we do it 3 times a week, where they go in, they spear the compost, and it tells us what emissions are there. It tells us whether we should turn it, the moisture contents, so it takes the man out of it. So basically what that is, it's you can do that. I mean, physically yourself, you can, after making compost for many years, probably we're doing the same thing, but it's not recorded. We can plug it into your computer and it prints you a report.
So it's like a probe that goes in?
It's a probe that goes in, and basically it goes in the same distance in every row. And the same, we do about 4 in a row, 4 up each side, and then basically it gets sorted out. So if we get a complaint, and we don't ever get one, but if we did get one, or EPA came along and said, look, we think that we need to see your records, we just pop that up. So get that up, yeah. Well, more or less, but more it's also we're protecting our own people.
Totally, yeah. What else? So making compost, selling compost to farmers, and using it yourself, obviously.
Well, we double crop, so we use a summer crop and a winter crop. We always put a percentage of depends on our workload, but the minimum would be a tonne to the hectare, because once our soils are active, and we're only repairing, we're not getting it going, if you know what I mean. A lot of soils are degraded, and until you get to sort of 4% organic matter in there, and you've got the bugs in there, and you look at them under the microscope and know they're right. We're only maintaining, because every time we run a vehicle over the land and harvest it, or whatever we do, sow it, we're damaging biology. So we've got to repair that every time. That's the way we look at it. And if we don't do it, it doesn't matter that much, because we can pick it up the next season anyway. Yeah. So.
And also, you're still selling seed though, Mara Seeds. You're still producing seed that you're selling.
We've got 2 major companies and a third one which we've developed lately. And Mara Seeds is the old production company, but it produces the seeds, and we still produce our tropical grasses like our Rhodes grass and Ceterias and that sort of thing, which mainly get exported into South America. And the Rhodes grass, that market's just diminished a bit, but we're doing a little bit more work in marketing that way, in that we're doing what we call char coat, which is our biochar coated seeds. Anything's got that's sold basically is coated these days. But Mara Seeds itself, it's the primary production side of our livestock, our cropping, our seeds business, and a new one that's been introduced of late is the hemp industry, which we can talk about that in a minute. But, the livestock side, what we do there is we export our own beef into mainly Singapore and Vietnam. It's under the name Mara Organic Meats, and it's been, we didn't find the market, they found us, in the sense that it goes into Ryan's groceries and whatever in Singapore, and we cryovac it, it's killed locally. And that's
have you got organic certification on that?
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's our beef side, and then our soy side is mainly our major market is into Vitasoy, which we do a large part of their organic for milk, and then the wheats and byproducts of, say, the soy, which is made into, we produce our full fat and defatted meals, and they go then into the soft side of the business, which is about basically making fertiliser mixes or compost mixes and granulated fertilisers, and also it's about stock feeds. But everything we do, it doesn't matter what it is, has biochar in it. So we get 2% biochar in most of our feeds, most of our stock feeds. In our fertilisers and particularly in our compost, we use up to 5 or 10% of biochar in there to, it just basically shortens the production time, holds the biology, holds the moisture, and it just takes any odour that's likely to be there out. So basically, wherever you've got biochar, whether it be in through an animal or whatever, you're knocking about 50% odour out of, that's the methane, ammonias, whatever.
Are you making that biochar yourself?
Yep. We have been. We've just built a new plant, or it's about to be recommissioned, and it's it'll go 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Gee,
So, but it's not just about producing biochar itself. When we're producing that, we're producing obviously activating phosphate at the same time. We've got a natural product here in Australia called apatite, which we 16% P. We activate that up to about 30% in through our fluid bed, and then our retorts, where we go in with the combination of the apatite and the wood chip, and that produces our biochar and produces our activated phosphates. That's either as a dicalcium phosphate or a activated phosphate.
Wow. Got a bit on, Stuart, haven't you?
There's a little bit there, yeah.
We probably only just scraped the surface, haven't we?
Well, in the production of biochar, it's one of those things that, quite frankly, if you're producing it just as biochar, it'd be difficult without losing money, because when you take 1 tonne of raw materials or biomass, 5 tonne of biomass, you can finish up with 1 tonne of proper biochar. But the side benefits to us are the power generation, syngas to replace LP gas, CO2 for storage for insect storage in silos, plant growth if you want to use it from there, hydrogen which can run the forklifts, nitrogen which is taken off it and re-injected back into our fertilisers, into our granules. We also have a plant in the middle called an IRIC, which is a high-speed granulator that deals with all these products, and it's purely state-of-the-art stuff. Yeah.
And this is all from in the 70s going, I reckon we've got to do things differently.
Well, no, we were in trouble. In basically, right. We'd degraded the soils, and then the opportunities have popped up, and I've got to learn that word no instead of on. It's one of those things that every day there's something comes along that, and biochar was only introduced to our business probably 10 years ago, in that we saw another advantage, and we paid a lot of money in research in through CQU in Rockhampton mainly, and that is mainly in the chicken industry, and that's where you have no bird deaths, basically 50% odours gone, 5 to 8% productivity gain, all that sort of stuff. And we've transferred that now back into all other industries. Yeah.
I'm going to look into. I've got some basic understanding of biochar, but that's fascinating that you've thrown it in everywhere. Talking about throwing things in, Stuart, we've just had a day at Bow Desert, listening to some ripping stories from other farmers, and Charles Massey and Bruce Pascoe. Any golden nuggets that you unearthed today? Anything that you heard and went, oh wow, that I haven't heard that before, or that's unreal?
I think some of the interesting stuff that was said there by Charles and generally across there was back to the basics of what harm's being done to the environment. We're all part of that, and part of what we do in our business is trying to deal with a lot of those things. Like particularly, say, the carbon thing, I think that's something that we all have a part to play in there, and we're not going to change it overnight, but it's something that can be done but you still have to have productivity at the end of it. And, you know, I guess it's all right to recognise that we're 2,000 years later or 20,000 years later, but no one knew any different, you know, and in fact, it's only being pointed out now. And today was some really good talks on the basics of saying, look, you know, we've got to we're up here and do this and do that, and that's everyone can be part of that. So it was quite good.
Stuart, thank you. You've been quite good today too, I have to say. I'll have to track you down, come and visit. So you're near Casino.
That's right.
Which way out of Casino are you?
Between Casino and Tenterfield.
Yeah, fantastic.
But one of the things we are doing, we've put a lot of work and effort into the hemp industry in the last 8 to 10 years on trial work, but we've really picked it up now in food production type plants, and I think it's going to become a major part of agriculture purely because of carbon storage. It's absolutely a magic plant. To wherever you plant it, you can grow any sort of crop after it. So I think it's a shining light in agriculture.
Do you reckon I could grow it at Burrawa, down north of hour and a half north of Canberra?
Not a problem at all.
Really?
Yeah. It's more adapting. What happens with hemp, it's regulated on daylight hours. You've got a better chance at the moment because most of our cultivars, or what we plant here in Australia, are in Northern Hemisphere, and they're more suited to, say, Tasmania, Victoria, lower part of Australia, and there are cultivars that you can plant there. Our yields here in the tropics, subtropics, are probably 400 kg to the hectare, which is nothing. And we've got them up now to around about 1 to 2 tonne to the hectare, which means that's serious money. Within 12 to 14 weeks, you're producing a crop, and whatever you plant behind it, it just absolutely grows easily. Yeah.
Tell me one last question, because again, another fascinating topic. What when you say it's worth a lot, who's buying? What are they doing with it? What's happening with that hemp? Are they turning it into what?
Well, there are a lot of parts to that. I mean, you know, there's the medical end, which is, you know, the high THC end, THC end. You've got the mid-range, which is the CBD, CBGs. And then what we're looking at is the food grade side, which is basically about high yields, higher proteins, high value crop that actually can be, you know, produced in a short period of time in rotations. That's the whole reason we went for it. And, you know, it's one of those things that we're not there yet. We've got a very good scientist that's working with us, and in our business we value the people that are there. We've got an animal scientist in the office, which he does a lot of the ration stuff, but we've got a very good chemical engineer aboard, and most of our research is done through CQU or SCU, or we're doing a very big trial at the moment on using biochar in the field with breeders, and there's 120 in each group, and that's there developing a dung beetle that will bury that biochar down so it works deep down.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Stuart, that was fun. I've got to say, you've really put a fire under me now. I've got to get out there and check out all this crazy stuff you're doing. It's unreal.
Come see us.
Yeah, look, we've got another day. Thank you again for your time here at the Farm2Plate Exchange, the Regionality Conference. We're at Tommerup Farm. Actually, Kay Tommerup is my next victim on the show. I don't think she's here yet. I better go and round her up. But Stuart, that was wonderful. Thank you.
Righto, mate. Good on you, sir.
Good on you. Hello, Kay Tommerup.
Hello.
This is your hay shed.
It is.
This is awesome. For those who haven't listened to the previous interviews and are not watching on a video thing, we are sitting in Kay's hay shed with some round bars behind us. The wind's dropped. Dave, he set up a little light there.
Yep.
It's like a lamp. It's an agricultural lamp, and here we are, and we are here at the evening event on the day one of the Farm2Plate Exchange Regionality Conference, which has been awesome.
Yep.
Firstly, thank you for your time, and thank you for hosting tonight's event.
Pleasure, absolute pleasure to have this here.
It's amazing. I love this country. I'm not even sure I've been to Bow Desert before. I would have driven through once upon a time.
Yeah.
It's amazing. You're
the
south
Kerry
of Bow
Valley,
Desert.
people don't know that it's here. It's such a
What's
secret.
What's it called?
Kerry Valley.
Oh, unreal.
Yeah. And Dave's family has been here since 1874. So
get out of here. That's a while.
Yep.
So how many generations was that?
Dave is fifth.
Fifth. Yeah, cool. We're going to get to your contribution to this generation a bit later on. Well, as soon as we need to. You are part of a bit of a powwow this afternoon with Laura and Lauren.
Yes.
And I should have done my homework and just worked out what was the name of your little
Collaboration.
session? Collaboration, which you spoke a lot about, which is awesome. Tell me about Rose, because Rose sort of convened this whole thing, and you'd done some work with Rose, I believe.
Yes. 10 years ago, we did the Agritourism Business Development Program. We were really at a crossroads with our farm and had just gone through deregulation and taken over the family farm.
So dairy farm.
Dairy farm, yes. And in a lot of trouble, really, financially, probably mentally as well. And we were trying to do something different, but, you know, a lot of hurdles. And honestly, if we hadn't have done that program with Rose, we would not be where we are. Like that ability to know who we were, what our story was, that taught us everything, and we relate everything that we do back to that story and those values, and if it doesn't fit, we don't do it.
So before we go to there, dive into that, the motivation?
To do something different,
Yeah.
to keep the farm going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it a financial and was it mental? Was it, I don't know, what other sort of catalysts were there?
Both, I suppose. There's a lot of pressure. When you're fifth generation, there's a massive amount of pressure. And I know that Dave feels that all the time when we're making decisions, that he's the one who has to keep this farm going. They've all been able to do it, so why shouldn't he? And so when deregulation came in and our income halved overnight. And
get out of here that bad. I'm just going to move that.
Bad.
Don't be alarmed. I'm just doing that.
Yeah. 65 cents down to 29 overnight.
Who thought that was a good idea?
I don't know. So many of our friends packed up.
Who did that though? Was it the dairy industry? Like, who actually said, right, we're going to halve that?
Well, I think that there was a lot of discussion in Victoria about what the milk price should be, and obviously they can produce milk a lot cheaper than what we can up here. So it didn't really suit, deregulation didn't suit the Queensland industry.
Clearly a decision made by people who weren't actually making milk.
Doing it, yeah. It was a very good sales pitch, really good sales pitch.
What, because it's cheaper and it's cheaper
they could truck it up. If there wasn't enough, they were going to be able to truck it up. I believe that was the crux of it. But it backfired. You know, we've got, I think it's 300 dairy farms left in Queensland, and we had over 2,000. Wow. Just
10 years ago.
20 years ago.
20 years ago.
Yep. And then that deregulation forced Dave's parents to hand over the farm because we were going broke. Just there was no way out of it. We were just going broke. So something had to give. And
so 25 cents or 29 cents a litre.
29 is what we went down to.
Cost per litre above 29 cents. So the cost of production was way
absolutely.
above what you're getting. Yeah.
Yep. And that has not changed. For 20 years, that hasn't changed. The milk price has been lower than the cost of production. And so either you give up, which we were told, you're too small, you'll never survive, get out. And that for Dave, that wasn't an option. So we found a way around it.
So you spoke to Rose. She gave you a different way of looking at the business and other opportunities?
Yeah, we did a whole, basically a whole review of everything, of our resources in every way, financial, human resources, our resources on the farm, and figure out what actually can work for our business. And we still do that sort of thing. What resources do we have that can fit into this new idea?
So, yeah, basically an audit. And I was chatting with earlier. Was it Rose? I can't remember now. Oh, no, it was Georgina.
Oh, yes.
And she was saying, you know, the agritourism in Queensland and the opportunities there, and really it's about activating what we already have on the farm. Like you've got cottages.
Yep, we
did
have
some cottages up. Tell me what your activation. What did you activate?
Yeah, so we first started with just having day visits to the farm and a bit of camping. And by doing that program with Rose, we realised that camping wasn't going to cut it, and that's when we went into doing up one of the houses. And look, that money that comes in from there, that pays for tractors and things that Dave wants to do on the farm. So we are using those resources. And I suppose for me as well, I grew up on a small crop farm, but it's nothing like this in the Redlands.
Where's that?
Down by the bay, beautiful red soil, now growing houses.
Oh, red as in just over here on the coast here?
Yes.
Oh.
Yep.
Growing houses.
It is. Yeah, it's such a
proliferating.
tragedy.
Great yield of houses down there now.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
So very different life. I'd been working in the city, and I think that really helped our business for me to have that totally different perspective on what was going on and to actually see what we had here and that people would love it. And I think that when you're a generational farmer, often you can't see what you have right in front of you, and you can miss out on those opportunities because you just can't see how beautiful it is.
I'm just writing down that quote. That's a lovely quote. Yeah, you're absolutely right, and that's David Marsh, one of my mentors, a farmer at Burrawa, where I'm from, and he says, the best, often the biggest asset a non-farmer has is the fact that they're not a farmer.
Yes, absolutely.
They don't have that liability, and they don't have that
the guilt.
The guilt.
Yep.
Yeah. And you turned up. Well, not turned up because you'd already been here, but you had the ability to look at it with a different lens.
Exactly. Yeah, and a different skill set as well. I can't do the things that Dave can do on the farm. I don't have that generational knowledge that he has, but what I do have is the ability to wordsmith and talk about our story and be really passionate about what we do and be really authentic. And really, I think diversifying into agritourism not only helped us financially, but at a time where we felt that we were worth nothing as dairy farmers, because if they're not going to pay you properly, then they obviously don't value you. I think people coming here to the farm and saying, wow, like, you guys are amazing, you're doing such a good job. I think for Dave, more so than me, that boost to his self-confidence was just what he needed at that time.
Was he? He's not here, so we can talk about him.
Yeah.
Was there resistance from him? Was he going, "Oh, this is not dairy farming"? This is like. Was there a bit of a battle going on internally about this whole new thing?
Maybe a little bit, but I don't think very much. I think that he realised that if we didn't do something different, he was going to be the one that shut down the dairy. And
so there was pain he was trying to get away from.
Yes, yeah. and even now, he still struggles with it, because the last few years have not been easy here. We've been in a really bad drought for the last 2 years, and at the end of the year we were pretty close to packing up. We're running out of stock water and running out of money as well. We're trucking feed from Victoria. And
it's the end of last year?
Yes, the end of last year, about November.
So you didn't have the rain last year, 2020,
no.
But maybe the southern, the New South Wales and Victoria had, to sort of.
Yeah, I think we got the rain in
drought.
December at some point. So before that, we were at the stage of, what do we do now? That we'd sold half our herd, and that nearly broke both of us, just selling beautiful cows that there was nothing wrong with them. You've had them for 13, 14 years. Emotionally, we were pretty broken. So I think that, that pressure to keep the farm going, that's always at the back of your mind. And thankfully, we have had the agritourism. So much of that money that bought those loads of hay and everything, that was agritourism. That's what funded that. And we were not, we never hid the fact that that's what people were doing when they were coming here. They were saving our cows and saving us. And I think those connections that we made because of that, and the stories that we tell, are always very genuine, very authentic, and that's why people keep coming back, and that's why they connect with what we're doing.
And it's not just the people turning up and having a lovely time. You're producing some award-winning products.
Yeah, we are.
Tell us about that.
We went out on our own with the dairy at the beginning of this year, but we had been operating last year as well, doing butter, and really focusing on the asset that we have, the Jersey cows. So focusing on the cream and the quality of it. And last year we won a state award for our butter, and we've just won a state award for our creme fraiche.
Fantastic. Just gone, just now.
A few weeks ago. Yeah.
So the nationals are on.
Yes, but I didn't enter because I had so many orders for our product after we won the award that I had nothing to put in the nationals.
You had nothing to exhibit, to apply with. Well, that's a kind of a good news story.
It's a good problem to have.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Tell me, Kay, you were at the conference today in Beaudesert.
Yes.
And you were contributing. What were there any sort of nuggets of gold that you? Any epiphanies today you went, oh, my God, that's amazing, or sort of any takeaways, any revelations you had as you sat there thinking about your session, but trying to focus on the other ones?
Yeah, well, when I was listening to Charles and Bruce this morning, I found, particularly Bruce's talk, I really found that so emotional. I really connected with what Bruce was saying, and particularly when he said, we don't want you to feel sorry for us. We want you to work with us. And for me, that just made me think that our family history on this property is so amazing, and wouldn't it be great if we could invite the local Indigenous community to join with us and do something on this family property, because their stories obviously are so important to them, and Dave's family stories are so important to him, that surely that's a beautiful collaboration to have. And Chris as well, Chris Eggert. He's
a classic,
that was fantastic.
Yeah.
And when he spoke about how he felt so ostracised from the farming community, I almost burst into tears, because we felt that so many times by changing what we do and being small and going out on our own. All those things have happened to us, and I just felt for him so much. Just I could feel the pain that he was experiencing, because we'd had it as well.
Talking about pain, more and more people, I think it's a great thing, are looking at agro-tourism, and for a number of reasons. Is there anything, and sometimes those reasons are the pain they're getting away from, and sometimes it's not so much the pain, it's more, oh my God, that'd be a lovely thing to do. It gets to amplify their message. It gets to sell direct to customers who really appreciate their food. So many, wonderful things that are drawing people towards doing that sort of thing. Any tips for our listeners that you can give, if they are now where you were 10 years ago?
I'd say know who you are. Absolutely know who you are, know your story, know your values, and stick to it. You will be pulled in different directions and told that this is what the customer wants and this is what you'll need to do to be successful. Your customer sees right through it. If you're not genuine and authentic and that's not your story, you won't succeed. Stick to it, always.
And Rose helped you navigate that, identify those values.
Yeah.
Not create the story, but just identify the story.
Yeah. To really build that, to drag out what was important to us and what we had to share with people that would resonate with them. And that's developed a lot over the years and changed probably. And we've reviewed it a couple of times with Rose over the years, saying, this isn't really working for us and we need to, change that a little bit, because it does something to the farmer, it does something to our family life or whatever. So it's something that you can adapt and change with, but you need to always be happy with what you're doing, and don't just be pulled into those things that is a nice thing to do for other people. This is your farm.
So that you referenced a story, you did some work with a hotel.
Yes.
And then you were, I'm not sure if you used the word regretful, but you certainly said it maybe wasn't the decision you would have made if you'd had the chance to do it again.
Yeah, it wasn't a good partnership. And I knew that from the beginning. I had that gut feeling that their reasons for doing it were not going to fit with what I wanted to get out of it. And I chose to ignore that and think about other benefits that would come from it. And I was just reminded that you should never do that. It's always about that gut feeling, about knowing that person has the same values as you, and that value proposition works for both of you.
At least one question, okay. The people who come to your farm here and they experience various aspects of it, what do you think it does for them? What do you see, or what's whether it's feedback or you just observe, what does it mean for them to be on ground, kids, families, mums and dads?
Yeah, we get a lot of people who've been on farms, grandparents that have been on farms, have no connection whatsoever with the land, and they want their kids to experience what they did as a child. They want their kids to connect with animals, to connect with farmers. They want kids to understand how much work goes into producing food. And I think even the adults that come here are surprised by how much work it is, and by the prices that you paid and all of that. We're very honest. They can ask us any question they want. We We answer anything about our business, about, our lives and whatever. And I think that they really value the fact that they can have a really genuine insight into our family.
Is there any, again, talking about tips and things, anyone who's thinking about, because again, for farmers, dairy, cropping, whatever, having strangers turn up to your farm and poke, well, not so much poke around, but you having to sort of, have a plan for them.
Yes.
Any sort of tips, any do's and don'ts that you can give people? You've got people on farm now.
Yes. You have to protect your farm. Above all, protect your farm and your family. Sort it out in the beginning. Don't just start and say, I think it'll be all right. We have pages and pages of insurance documents and procedures and protocols that we have set out. We have signage. We have a waiver that everybody signs when they come onto our farm. We have also started a company that runs the tourism as a separate business to the farm.
Yep.
And we didn't do that in the beginning, and that would be my advice to anybody who's thinking about it. Set it up properly from the beginning, because it will go well. People do want to experience what farmers have. It's an unknown, and it's really exciting for them. So make sure that you take the time to set things up properly in the beginning to protect your family farm, because you've worked too hard to lose it.
Kay, that was wonderful. Thank you again for for hosting us tonight. I can hear bottles being thrown into rubbish bins back there. I dare say there's a bit of grog being drunk over there. I had the pleasure of having a nibble on some ice cream. The butterscotch was delicious. Thank you very much. So just a quick wrap up. Ice cream, butter.
Creme fraiche, cream, buttermilk. We also do pork, veal, some lamb, the eggs, free-range eggs. So we've got a bit going on the farm.
Are you supplying to Harris Farm?
No, we aren't. That was considered, but Jersey milk, unhomogenised Jersey milk, is a bit tricky to work with. So
yeah, sure.
Yeah, but that is our next move, is having our own milk as well, bottling our own milk. So that'll be exciting.
I can't wait for that. I drive all the way up here just to get a bloody 2 litre or 1 litre, 500 ml bottle of it.
I intend to win the state award for it next year. So,
for those who can't see the video, there is determination in her eyes. Kay, thank you. That was that was wonderful. And again, thank you for hosting tonight's dinner. And I look forward to catching up tomorrow.
Thank you
for the rest of it.
Thank you. Pleasure.
We're on. Welcome, Kate McBride, to the Regenerative Journey.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. You are the last victim tonight.
Lucky me.
Yes. And you... So we're here at the Farm2Plate Exchange Regionality Conference. It's the end of day one. We're here I just interviewed Kay Tommerup, had chats about butter, farming, agro-tourism. Was awesome. Yeah. So you spoke this evening, just before dinner. It's quite cold, isn't it?
I'm good.
Right?
I'm
okay,
good.
You're
just cooling down, though.
Nervous.
Yeah.
Don't be nervous. About your experiences, and for those who don't know you, can you give us a little bit of a snapshot, a bit like what you did on the back of the truck there, just like, home, that fascinating history of 1.1 million hectares?
Acres, yeah.
Acres. How many hundreds of thousands of sheep? But that was incredible. Can you just give us just a bit of a snapshot of, just to set the scene for who is Kate McBride?
Yeah, so I'm from a sheep property out in Western New South Wales. It's called Talano Station, and today we're 500,000 acres. We run about 12,000 sheep and get probably about 12 to 15,000 rangeland bush goats off a year. But yeah, Talano, the station, has a really incredible history. So of course, we do a bit of tourism, people coming around, and we share both the Barkinji, so the traditional owners, we share their history, but also Talano has a really rich history. So back in its heyday, it was 1,100,000 acres. It ran the whole way to the township of Menindee. We're 45 kilometres away from that, so it was absolutely massive. It, in 1 year, saw 336,000 sheep, they're just short the whole year round.
Was that year using mechanical shears, or was it the old blade shears?
From my understanding, it was the old blade shears.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
How many stand shed would that have been?
It was 24. So today we still got the original shearing shed. It's 8 stand. But, yeah, back then it was 24. And it's really interesting. The more that I've been learning about, ag and our soils and our environment and everything, I can see the damage that actually did to our land. So we don't really use that wool shed at all anymore. It's on the river because, of course, back in the day, so we're on the lower Darling Barker River. Back in the day, paddle steamers was massive. We had one of the largest privately owned fleets of paddle steamers in the country. So all the wool and everything like that went down on it. But yeah, because the shearing shed, there was one shearing shed on the place, essentially, all of the sheep went through that shearing shed, and now it's just filled with invasive native scrub and nothing else really grows. So I can see the damage that overgrazing has done, and it's still, like 150 years later, the land still hasn't recovered. So yeah, that's
do we know we're so, this is so typical of my interviews, we've just gone so sideways somewhere. What do we know how to repair it?
No, this is something that I'm really keen to start learning. So I've had a pretty interesting journey when it comes to agriculture and what I've been doing, and now I sort of feel like it's time for me to sort of really start learning that. And that's what's been incredible about this weekend, and hearing people like Charles Massey speak about regen agriculture. It's just been so eye-opening because it is that regen journey is something that I'm really excited to start. It's sort of where I see the future of Tolarno actually going. But I think sometimes it's probably from a young person's perspective as well, where do you start? It's a massive deal. And our property today is 500,000 acres. Where do you start?
Well, that is a great question. And I guess you might, you start small. You start around the house. Start with a lawn, see what works, I reckon.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's I'll literally okay, well, I don't know. Do you pick it, get the map and just drop a pen on it and go, well, I'm going to start there.
Yeah.
Grazing, water retention. I know you weren't asking the question, but I'm thinking about, I'm not terribly familiar with that country, but I was speaking with Bruce Pascoe earlier today, grabbed him for a quick interview, and we were talking about that country, and he appreciates, and it's pretty well documented now, that that country was very different back then, thousands of years ago, and overgrazing has done that damage. Hopefully not irreversible. We'll never probably get back to that point because there's so many variables there now, but that may well be your life's journey.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. And I'm excited for that. I think it's a really exciting journey, and listening to everyone else's journeys, how they've sort of started. And yeah, that's sort of, I suppose, where I'm going to start. But it is really exciting. It's a massive sort of to try and start from somewhere. It's, a big job, but I think the benefits, especially seeing it today, seeing regen agriculture just showcased in the way it was today, it just filled me with so much hope for what can be achieved. And that's the interesting thing, I think, being out our way. Of course, a lot of the people that have been on the regen journey have been from different parts of Australia. We are really different out in Western New South Wales, but yeah, having my own journey and sort of different experiences, and maybe one day as well being able to share with people my region agriculture journey, that's sort of really exciting too.
Your journey's already well underway, from what I understand, because you've been appearing on the telly a bit and of late. Tell us about how that sort of, what the catalyst for that was and why, and then we'll go from there. I think that's awesome, because you are, you talked about, young farmers and the opportunities, which I'll get to in your talk there before, but you're well on the way. So let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, so of course I was born and brought up on the station.
You can pump your tyres up. Don't go, I won't tell them about that bit. Just, this is open slather.
Yeah, well, so born and brought up on the station, it's my heart and soul. It's everything to me. But then moved away and did all my schooling in Adelaide, and then finished school in 2015 and went back to the station, and the lower Darling Barker, so the river that I've grown up alongside, spent all my summers in, it was this meeting place for everyone growing up. It was gone. There was absolutely no water there at all. And we knew...
Had you not seen it in that state before?
Not in that state, no.
Wow.
So the lower Darling Barker, where I'm from, it, like, since records began, it never had a no-flow event lasting more than 2 months. And all of a sudden I came back and we had 8.5 months of a bone-dry river. And I just recognised something was wrong. And it wasn't because of drought. Like all the governments and people upstream were saying, oh, it's because of drought, there's no inflows. But that's not the reality because, you know, we've had droughts in the past and we hadn't experienced this. So that's sort of where my journey of advocacy and I suppose being a bit of an environmentalist began, and went and did a lot of like training myself, media training, learning about the Murray-Darling Basin, trying to work out what's happened, what's gone wrong. And we got some water back, which was great. Our community really, like, you know, we were putting pressure on politicians, we were trying to raise awareness, but then it rained and everyone goes, oh, it's all good again, don't worry, everything's all sweet. And then all of a sudden, about 2 years later, we were back on a bone-dry river. After we'd had about 12 months or 18 months of like any water at all, we were back on a bone-dry river, and we just went like, how can this be possible? How can we, like, and for me, what it triggered inside, like our property, we have a stock and domestic license. So, you know, of course I'd always bathed in it. We'd used it for our stock, but that's not what like triggered something inside of me. I was like, how can we be treating our environment like this? You know, and then all of a sudden in 2019, we saw the mass fish deaths, and a video I put up got 6 million views. It was of my old man and his good mate Dick Arnold holding dead Murray cod. And, you know, we still get people from like overseas calling us up every now and again saying, what happened here?
Just to put to identify the significance of that, those Murray cod were how old?
About 80 years old.
80-year-old Murray cod. And they're dying because the water's not flowing, and they're just rank, stinky, and these things have been there for 80 years.
Exactly,
clearly. And
that's the thing. So, like, we recognised once again, it was like, hang on, this isn't drought again, because we've, like, in Western New South Wales, we know drought. We sort of, like, have to, unfortunately, live and breathe it at times. And especially looking at these, like, 80-year-old Murray cod, where, like, these guys know what drought is too. These guys, like, they're you know, the species has evolved to deal with this. And so sort of recognising that and going, okay, well, if it's not drought, that's what we're being told by politicians and other people. If it's not drought, then what is it? And, you know, it was really simple what it was. We're taking too much water from a really, like, fragile ecosystem, the Murray-Darling, and also we're not managing our water resources properly. And that's where my journey really started. Like, I never thought I'd be, like, all of a sudden somewhat of like a water expert, but our whole township all of a sudden had to, like, it really galvanised our township, and we all became water experts.
So that's your bread and butter. That's literally the arteries of your environment.
The Darling River is the lifeblood of the outback. I've always said it. And, you know, it's not just for our environment, but it's for our communities, both Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal. Like, it is what keeps these areas breathing. And so all of a sudden to have that ripped out, to have the taps turned off, it was just absolutely heartbreaking. So, yeah, that's where my sort of advocacy journey, I suppose, started a bit.
Through the video, so it was like, wow, this video, let's get this girl on, da-da-da-da.
Yeah, it just sort of kept evolving. And, yeah, over the next week or two, like, the media of Australia just, like, descended upon Menindee. Like, my hometown was put on the map. And that was really special. But then you sort of realise, like, hang on, we're on the map because we've had over 1 million fish die. You know, and we've got dry rivers. And
is that right? 1 million fish?
Yeah, it was over 1 million. It was 3 consecutive mass fish kills. And, like, yeah, it was just catastrophic. But that's the thing, like, we were facing these issues, not so much mass fish kills, but dry riverbed, huge amounts of blue-green algae. Like, we're facing all these issues. And I spoke a bit in my speech before about the township of Wilcannia. I mean, that has a male life expectancy of 37. Like, this is what we're facing in Australia and, you know, rural Australia, and it's just not getting out there enough. So, yeah, I sort of became a bit of a voice for people out there, and, like, you know, there are so many people that have an incredible voice out there as well with me. But, yeah, sort of started doing that, and then all of a sudden people went like, oh, you're a young female, you must know about drought, when the drought was on. So got roped into doing a few things on drought, and then it was, you know, oh, you must know about COVID in rural areas. And it's sort of become one of these things that the media, now that they see me as, like, a young female who suppose has my head half screwed on, they sort of come to me for different things. And yeah, like, now I'm here today talking about how we can get young people into agriculture, and that's really special for me. Like, it's sort of, to me, it's a bit like I'm giving back to my community and to, like, regional Australia as a whole.
So you were on, just for those who want to do a bit of digging around, Q&A, that went bananas, and then you've been on the project a few times.
Yeah,
I'm highlighting just to highlight the fact that again, your journey has begun, and maybe it's not the way you planned it, but, advocacy, articulation and experience,
Yeah, it's interesting. I had in 2019, I had an Australian story, like an episode done on me, and I sort of was like so taken back because it's sort of, to me, I feel like my journey is just beginning, but I suppose the reality is like I've got a bit of a story to tell already, and I think there's so many young people in ag, but like everyone in ag, they have a story to tell, and it's just whether they have the ability to tell it, one thing, but also given the chance to tell it, because we've got some pretty incredible stories when it comes to the ag industry.
Kate, tell me about, you mentioned about getting young people into ag. I mean, there's no silver bullet there. What are some of the things, for our younger listeners who might be thinking about it or, are getting in it, and sort of what would you suggest to them? What are some things? I mean, I know it's so broad depending on what industry and everything, but what are some of the things that you could suggest?
I think, there's two things that I sort of always highlight. Like, one's education, making sure that kids sort of from like a school age understand the opportunities that we have. Like, and I'm always like, every chance I get, I'm going out to schools or universities and highlighting all the really cool things that I'm doing, because, I look at the sort of last month for me, like 1 week I was out fencing. The next week I was, I work at a think tank. I work for the Australian Institute.
You want to get to that? Yep.
Yeah. So, work for them. So I was writing a report on water issues and mental health in the bush. This week I'm here, and next week I'm going to be in Canberra meeting with politicians. Like I have about 4 or 5 different jobs, and that's just, my journey in agriculture. It's not just, working on the station or working on, mum and dad's farm anymore. Like, and that's something that's really important to me. Like, I love the ability to go back and do that, but there are so many opportunities. And I think trying to get that out, and I think it's our job to sort of advertise agriculture, because I know that agriculture is the best industry in the world to be working on. But also getting people excited about the future. I think too often we hear about, the woes of agriculture and that there's no future and there's no hope, and that's not the reality. And we're seeing it today with all the incredible speakers. They all have so much hope. And I'm sort of like holding onto my seat, because I just know how exciting the next, I think, 10 years are going to be, as we're seeing all these young people coming up through the ranks, the incredible ideas that they've got, the progressive views. Now's the time to be in agriculture. And I think especially when it comes to being a young female in agriculture, there has never been a better time to be here.
We need to change some things in high school. That's a career, what are they called? Career advisors. They would say, we got to get them getting people, like you get 90, 98 in your HSC or whatever the state equivalent is. And they go, oh, you got to be a doctor. You get 40, and they go, oh, you could probably go farming. But we've got to spin that on its head.
No, exactly.
It's a golden opportunity. Tell me about the think tank and meeting with politicians. Or are they two separate things?
They're sort of two separate things. So over the last few years, of course, with water issues, I've created some pretty incredible relationships with different politicians, and particularly a few senators from all different parties. And that's what's been really incredible, is to be able to work with people from all different views. And I think I really have an ability to sort of show them something that otherwise they wouldn't hear those sides of the story enough. They get a lot of rhetoric from the cities, and I think being able to take them out, I've taken a heap of them out to the station, and I've taken a heap of them out to Menindee and shown them the reality of what's going on, particularly when it comes to water management, and being able to do that's been really important. So this year I started with the Australia Institute. I'm called like an Anne Cantor Fellow. So essentially I'm a researcher, and they're sort of helping me with career counselling as well. They're giving me a lot of mentorship, looking at networks, all of this incredible stuff, but they treat me just like any other researcher. So I get to pick my topics. Last week I was writing on mental health in the bush. The week before I was sort of working on water issues. They give me a lot of freedom, and I think that's what's been really incredible, because they've said in the past that if it wasn't for me putting these ideas and perspectives forward, it's something that gets missed, and all too often rural Australia gets forgotten.
So where does your reports or your research, where does that then go? Does that help inform politicians on policy and the party stuff? What happens to it? Yeah,
so my first report actually gets released hopefully next week, which is really, really exciting. It's quite a big report. And I suppose we'll do a few things. We always say that we're as much think as we are tank. So we have a massive comms team, and it's actually working out, where does this go? Does it go to politicians? But also, everyday Australians need to know this information. It's not just there to sort of influence a politician on what way they should vote. Like, everyday Australians need to be connected to these issues that we think are really important. We're out in the media a lot. I think it's interesting now that I work for them. I see them on like TV all the time and on radio. Like, we honestly have some of like the brightest minds in Australia, from economists to like people in climate change. It is just amazing to see these people, and particularly young people. They're really supporting them and giving them a voice, and that's just so important to see.
And is again that related to your meeting with the politicians as well? Is sort of a cross-pollination with that, or has it been a separate sort of a
like
thing?
Work, like, you know, with some politicians that I've already got relationships with, but no, it was quite separate. It was an opportunity that came up, and they said, hey, we want you to come and do this. It's been an incredible opportunity. So I'll be there for at least 12 months.
Cool.
And it's just been incredible.
So who's at home doing all the work?
So my parents
like,
actually...
I'm gone again.
Yeah.
I'm off to Canberra.
No. My parents actually both live in Adelaide as well, so they're separated. And then I've got two brothers. I've got one that's 14 months younger than I am, so he's 22, and then one that's 2 years old. So they live in Adelaide as well. So we have the most incredible team up at the station, and I think they really understand with me, and as do the think tank. So the think tank allows me to go week on, week off, and the station allows me to sort of choose when I can be up there, of course, shearing, always straight up there. But I think everyone I work with understands that to get the best out of me, like, I need that freedom to sort of go and do different things. And when opportunities like this come up, like being able to do that, because a lot of people don't have that opportunity. So we've got about 5 or 6 staff at the station that keep it running. They're all like family. Like, it's just this tiny little community that's like my heart and soul. Awesome.
And as you were saying in your thing, in your talk before, you know, it was it used to be a town pretty much, and it's sad when those it's sad that those little towns or villages aren't there anymore. But you know, it's really important to maintain that sense of community, isn't it? You know, and having and treating your staff as family. I think that's wonderful. Kate, I'm conscious of time. 18 minutes in, I have another question for you, if you don't mind. Is any gold nuggets that you dug up today that you know, someone said something at the conference and you went, oh my God, that's awesome, or I'm going to look into that, or, you know, anything that really stood out, any revelations that you can share?
I think regen agriculture as a whole has been like massive, like my eyes have just been massively open today. But I think really like that respect for your soils, and that you really need to treat them above all else. Like, you know, it's not just dirt, like, and I think all too often we as farmers just like, you know, think of it as dirt, like really trying to keep those healthy soils. That was fascinating to me, and seeing, I think the evidence right there on the screen of exactly what these people are doing, the benefits that they're seeing, was incredible. And
just another thing, the principles work everywhere and are the same, aren't they? And it's you know, the principles of as Charlie Massey went through today, you know, they can be applied on your mint plant on the back veranda, or to, you know, some hundreds of thousands of acres. So, and I think that's the wonderful thing, is that it's not about, oh, that's not going to work. It's about adapting to your situation. So there's some grazing management that you could adapt. There's, I don't know, God knows whatever else, but that the good news is that those things are there, and the science is behind it, and people are doing it. I did have another question for you, and it's totally gone now. I was just going to finish on it. Anything else from any other takeaways from today's course?
Oh, just
the conference
this morning, having Charles Massey and Bruce Pascoe sitting up on that couch was like, I was so starstruck. I have been so excited for months about this conference, because they really are two people. Like, I don't read all that much, but I've got their books, they sit on my desk. So I have never been so excited about that, and to be able to meet them and have a chat with them, couldn't ask for anything more.
They are awesome. That's what I remember I was going to say now. It was more about two words that I try and use as often as I can, and also action, is reverence and compassion for the landscape. You know, looking at it, and this was Bruce brought up this morning, and he didn't necessarily use the word compassion or reverence, but the sentiment was the same, is that looking upon and remember when Bruce said, I'm here talking about love and not tractors, you know, and that was awesome, because it's a word that we don't use enough in terms of our landscape, you know, and having, as I said, you know, having an affair with the landscape is a really healthy thing, you know, and bringing the romance back and bringing in the love and the compassion. So that's awesome. Kate, thank you so much for your time. I'm going to let you escape to the rest of the party now and get warm. It's quite cool out here now in the hay shed, and I'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow for day 2.
Can't wait. Thanks for having me on.
Good on you, Kate. Thank you. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed sitting down with those guys and girls there at Tommerup Farm in the hay shed. It was awesome. Windy, but we were able to round some bales up and some old furniture and set aside some time with those wonderful presenters and hosts. And next week is part 2. I won't tell you who we're talking to because you'll just have to wait to next week. But it was a ripper and a beautiful way to finish off the 2 days at the Farm2Plate Exchange.
This podcast is produced by Rhys Jones at Jaeger Media. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to subscribe, share, rate and review. For more episode information, please head over to www.charliearnott.com.au.